We've got the top 5 best Rams games since returning to Los Angeles and the most disappointing. That's coming up next on Locked On Rams.
You are Locked On Rams, your daily Los Angeles Rams podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, Ramily, and welcome to another edition of Locked On Rams. Thank you for making Locked On Rams your first listen every single day, free and available wherever you get your podcast. We're also available over on YouTube, so if you want to check out the video version of the show, find us on YouTube, join the party, hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell. We just passed 7,000 subscribers, and it's all thanks to you. And let us know, what is your favorite game since the Rams returned to Los Angeles? Also, what's your biggest disappointment? My name is Doug McCain. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at DMAC_LA. I've been covering LA sports for over a decade, the Lakers for SI, the Dodgers for Dodgers Nation, but now I'm covering the Rams for Locked On. And as always, I'm joined by the Rams pre, half, and post-game show host for the Rams flagship radio network, ESPN 710 LA, the People's Champ. You can follow him on Twitter at Travis Rogers. Now, Travis, we got the top 5 games since the Rams have returned to LA. The way I did this list, I think I did the order of importance, the order of insignificance. We're going to get right in. You ready to go, my man?
I can't wait. There's been some unbelievable moments in the last 6-7 years. Can't wait to talk about them.
All right, so we got to start right at the top. We're doing this in reverse order. We're going to start with number one, the number one most significant game. I think you can guess it. It is Super Bowl 56. The Rams win at home at SoFi Stadium. Final score 23-20. And, of course, this game had everything. You had a comeback. You had Matthew Stafford with the no-look pass. To me, that's the indelible image. That is the mark, I think. And that wasn't some showboating. That wasn't some we're at the Rucker. No, that was a play where it's literally Magic Johnson. He's no-looking just so he can make that play, so he can find Worthy on the break. Such a great play. Gets Von Bell jumping, makes that play, Cooper Kupp, and you get that big touchdown drive. 15 plays, 79-yard touchdown drive. And that's why I have his number one, and you win that Super Bowl in L.A.
Yeah, so there's so many things that happened because of this. Like you talked about, there's the iconic moment of the no-look pass. There's the repeated attempts to get it into the end zone and the repeated throws at Cooper Kupp at the end, and they finally punch it in with a goal line fade, which they never run, and they run it to score the Super Bowl winning touchdown. But more than the play, more than anything else, it was proof of concept, and I'm stealing that from Rob Pelinka, who said that during Laker introduction of their rookies the other day. It was proof of concept that this works, that their decisions work, that the decision to move on from Jared Goff worked, that the decision to move on from Todd Gurley worked, that the decision to pay Odell Beckham, the decision to trade for Von Miller, to trade for Matthew Stafford, to continue to go all in on the F them picks mode, right? The Les Snead mantra that he'd been selling for years is the window is open, we got to go, we're going to go now. That if you don't get that, and then you are where they are right now, which is a very different football team, a team that is very shallow on talent right now. It is a for who, for what? What did we do exactly? Yeah, maybe you got a couple of bites at the apple, but you didn't finish it. That they finished it validates everything that they did to get to that point. And without it, it's just a totally different story. They did it in Los Angeles. They did it at SoFi Stadium. They did it in front of a significant amount of Rams fans. It just was the crowning achievement of the Les Snead, Sean McVay era.
Exactly. And you said it best. It was the realization of the proof of concept, of the dream, of the fact that the FM picks era, it made sense. Because if they did that, they took all their money out of that 401k, if they pushed all their chips in the middle of the table and they didn't win, it would be a cautionary tale for teams down the line. But for the Rams, it worked. And I think that's why you make the move for Matthew Stafford. Because look, love me some Jared Goff, always will be a fan of the guy, but he's not going to lead that Rams team to a 15-play, 79-yard touchdown drive down the stretch. And also, too, OBJ goes down. Cooper Kupp, he was being doubled up. I mean, they could send guys to his side, and you didn't have Robert Woods, Tyler Higbee, and OBJ. I mean, there was a lot of guys that were out in that game, and he still was able to make plays. There was no running game in that game. They had 23 rushes for 43 yards, an average of 1.9 yards per carry. So the rush game wasn't there. No running game. Matthew Stafford, he took the bull by the horns, and he said, look, I made comebacks in the regular season with the Lions. Now I have 2 comeback game-winning drives in the playoffs. To me, that cemented his legacy. That is what we're going to look back years down the line. And I think he deserves that gold jacket. I think one of the reasons why is he's the Super Bowl champion, and he does it with the Rams. Other thing, too, Travis, everyone respected Aaron Donald, right? Everyone knew that, hey, he's the best football player in the game, possibly, but absolutely the best defensive football player in the game. 2 sacks. He made his mark on the last play, just ending that game, blowing up that line. I think that reinforced the reality that, hey, this is one of the best defensive football players that this game has ever seen.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that. That was the next thing I wanted to mention, because of all of the images, I think that maybe the image that's going to stick with us the most was Aaron Donald after sacking Joe Burrow, after getting that final play, after breaking up, one-arm tackling this guy, is him holding his hand up and pointing to his ring finger like, I got it, right? That moment where the confetti's coming down, he's pointing to his hand like, I got this ring. And to your point, everybody knew Aaron Donald's a great player. Aaron Donald is going to the Hall of Fame. Aaron Donald might be the greatest player ever at the history of his position. But without a Super Bowl ring, there's always that, but there is no more of that. That's done, that he got that done. I'll never forget that. I'll never forget Andrew Whitworth carrying his kids around the field as the confetti's coming down. And for me personally, I'm in the Rams radio booth. I'm listening to the voice of the Rams, JB Long, call this as it's happening. And him and Maurice Jones-Drew on the color, and Kirk Morrison is my co-host, and Marco Farr who's down on the field. We're all kind of looking at each other like, I can't believe this is happening. We were just in the Coliseum a couple of years ago watching a Jeff Fisher team, and now here you are as a Super Bowl champion. It felt incredibly surreal and incredibly satisfying that it happened as quickly as it did.
Yeah, it was a fairy tale ending, a great ending for that Rams team. And also, too, 17 of the last 19 Super Bowl winners, Travis, have worn the white jerseys. If you wear the white, good chance you're winning that Lombardi trophy, right? So definitely great to see. I mean, that was just the moment that really just crystallized the entire movement back to LA. I thought that's one of those games where you see fans a decade from now, they became fans because of that game, right? That's when you really start to build, when you get that casual fan. So that's definitely coming in at number 1. The gunslinger, Matthew Stafford, like you said, Aaron Donald, the 2 sacks, blowing up the play. Everyone knew it was coming. Sean McVay even said, I knew AD was going to make a play. He did that. Right. But I will say, after the win, thanks to Rodney Harrison, I had anxiety right after the game because I was fearful that AD was going to retire, so I couldn't enjoy it for that long. But still, that's a clear-cut number 1, a great day in LA.
I want to throw one other thing in there too, Doug, is that it allowed them to do what they're doing right now too. That by putting some, for lack of a better word, some credibility in the bank of Les Snead and Sean McVay saying, look, we know what we're doing. Trust us while we go through and rebuild this thing again. Without that Super Bowl championship, I don't know if everybody's like, yep, okay, let them do it again. It's a little bit like the Dodgers, that maybe they haven't cashed in a bunch of World Series over the last 10-year window, but because they're always so good, when they decide to kind of zig when everyone else is zagging, you trust them to do it because you've seen them do it before. And I think that's where we are at the Rams. That Super Bowl allows us to go, yeah, okay, let's see what's coming next. Even if it might not make a ton of sense to us, it makes sense to them. I'm willing to let them do it.
Yeah, I want to ask you, Travis. I want to ask you, because you're a professional. You're the post-game show host, right? You got to be objective to an extent. But for me, hey, I'm watching that game as a super fan, right? And after he hits Kupp on that back shoulder fade, his 36th fourth quarter comeback of his career, Matthew Stafford, I'm going crazy. I'm going nuts. What do you do in that situation in the booth? I mean, are you objective? I mean, what's your reaction like?
It's really hard not to get emotional and not to get, let it kind of take you over in there, because like you mentioned at the top, all the every dayers. No, I've been doing Rams pre-half and post since they came back to Los Angeles. I've been to all these games. I've covered every single game that they've had, and to be that close to it. But the reason that you were able to kind of stay in it, Joe Burrow's a very bad man. There was enough time on that clock that it wasn't a guarantee that they're going to win. It was very likely, but Joe Burrow had already hit a couple of big ones there, and you were still staying in your shoes just enough to say, okay, let's let Aaron Donald do his thing, because Joe Burrow was a really scary guy that day.
Yeah, because like, hey, in the Dodgers press box, when I'm up there, if you even crack a smile, people give you those looks like, oh, you're not a professional. Be a professional. So just wanted to ask you. But yeah,
Yeah.
Stafford, the absolute gunslinger. That to me was my big takeaway. Remember the wave from Stafford after the game? I always remember that. But yeah, we're going to touch on the final 4 games in a one disappointing game, the most disappointing game since the Rams have returned to LA. That's coming up next on Locked On Rams.
All right, before we get to that, D-Mac, let's talk about our pals at FanDuel. You can take your first swing at betting Major League Baseball on FanDuel and get 10 times your first bet amount in bonus bets up to $200. That's right. If you just bet $20, you will get $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. That's $200 you can spend betting everything from the money line to the over-under to who you think is going to hit the first home run, all in an app that is safe, secure, and incredibly easy to use. Plus, when you win, you get paid instantly. You don't have to wait. You win, you get your money back. That's how it's supposed to go. There's no better place to bet on FanDuel, to bet Major League Baseball on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. You can probably get some pretty good odds on the Padres and Mets right now. That's coming unglued. The Dodgers still in third place. All sorts of opportunities for you to make a little money at FanDuel. So sign up today and visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get up to $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, the official partner of Major League Baseball.
And Roth and Ronnie here on Locked On Rams. Thank you for making Locked On Rams your first listen every single day. Free and available wherever you get your podcast. And here, Travis, in this second segment, we're going to keep running down these games. We're going to start with number 2. Like I said, most significant, most satisfying. I'm going with the NFC Championship game in 2021, the penultimate game of that dream season. Rams win 20-17. They battled back from a 2-score deficit. They had lost 6 straight games of the 49ers. And you have to add that context there. To me, it almost felt like when Ice Cube punched Debo in Friday, you finally beat that bully, and it's just so satisfying. That's the game that I was at. And to me, watching that 49ers heavy crowd, all that red, just walk out of that stadium with their head down, Niner gang, Whiner gang, whatever you want to call them, that to me was just so satisfying, Travis.
It really was. And kind of putting it together with what we were talking about with the Super Bowl win a couple of minutes ago, the Rams can't beat the Niners, right? That they for whatever reason, it is an unsolvable puzzle for them. And not only have they not been able to beat them, they've gotten pounded a bunch of times along the way. That some of the Rams' worst performances in the Sean McVay era have come against the San Francisco 49ers. But when it mattered the most, the Rams found a way to get it done. And Matthew Stafford was really good in that game, but I would be remiss if I didn't say it, because every time we talk about that NFC Championship game that ultimately led to their Super Bowl victory, you got to talk about Jaquiski Tartt dropping that interception. Because if he holds on to that ball, and look, it's not quite Bill Buckner material, but it's one of those things that as the ball's in the air, you're like, well, that's it. They're going to lose to him again. The Niners are going to go back to the Super Bowl, and the Rams go back to, wait, he dropped it? Okay. And now all of a sudden, here come the Rams. They end up winning the game. Everything that you mentioned, look, Niner fans packed SoFi Stadium. So all that red is going out, is incredibly sad. We do our post-game show at Hollywood Park Casino, which is right across the street from SoFi Stadium. It was loaded with sad Niner fans. It was one of the greatest days of my life. It was just terrific.
Yeah, it really, just getting back to your point about Jaquiski Tartt. I mean, it really felt like you had second life there, right? 9:48 to play in the fourth quarter. I remember Joe Buck saying, oh, is there something wrong with Matthew Stafford's elbow, trying to act like there was an injury at the time, like he couldn't have any arm strength behind it, and he just drops it. I just remember him being on the grass, his hand on his head, like he knew that was like the beginning of the end for that 49ers team. But also, too, I was saying, this is Jimmy G. I mean, I can probably trust Jimmy G probably not to take this team to the promised land. And really the big key to that game, you got Cooper Kupp, 11 catches, 142 yards, 2 touchdowns. Odell Beckham Jr., we talk about, that's why you make the trade for Matthew Stafford. He was huge, 113 yards, 9 catches, those big moving the chains catches on third down. I thought he was massive in that game.
Odell was great, and he resurrected his career in that very short time he was back with the Rams, because when he came over from Cleveland, it's like, he made that great catch on Monday Night Football, but he's this, that, he's, all, but he showed up. It's like, oh, no. That's a Browns thing. OBJ can really go. He's still a great player. He saved his career. I want to go back to something you mentioned about Jimmy G and not being scared of him. I stopped singing that song a long time ago. I don't care what he does against the other 30 teams in the league. When he plays against the Rams, he's Joe Montana. And it's just it's one of those things that they can't get to him. They can't hit him. They can't sack him. He's accurate. He's quick. He's on point. You know, all of these things that I get it, that he's not a guy that 49er fans were completely in love with. But against the Rams, that dude did not mess up very often, that you weren't afraid of him leading a 90-yard drive with a minute and a half to go the way that some of these other guys do. But Jimmy G was a bad man against the Rams, and they finally cracked that code too. Was a big deal.
Yeah, exactly. That they cracked the Jimmy G code, and they also cracked the rushing code. I mean, we saw this 49ers team just run at will against this Rams team during the regular season, and they hold Deebo Samuels to 26 yards rushing and Mitchell to 20 yards rushing on 11 carries. And I just give a lot of credit to A.D. Gaines, Ashawn Robinson on the edges, Leonard Floyd, Von Miller. And how about Eric Weddle coming off the streets? Everyone said, this guy's not going to do much and this and that. He plays 100% of the defensive snaps, just his third game back at a team-high 9 tackles in that win. I mean, that to me was really one of the big storylines of the game.
Keep in mind, too, he played in the Super Bowl the vast majority of that game with a torn pec. Right. And you're right. They brought him in right as the playoffs were starting, just basically because he knew which direction to run when the ball was snapped. That it wasn't that, he was taking his kids to school and things like that. And that dude stepped up in a way that I'm not going to forget anytime soon. He was terrific in that game. And there you could kind of feel it coming a little bit towards the end of the regular season. Remember, the Rams blew that lead at the end. I believe it was the last game of the season against the Niners that let the Niners into the playoffs. It dropped the Rams from the 2 out of that number 2 spot. Now, all of a sudden, they got to go to Tampa to start the play. All of these things that were supposed to be a hindrance to them going to the Super Bowl ultimately ended up working. And I think it gave them an opportunity that even though they lost to San Francisco, they realized they could beat San Francisco, and they did it a few weeks later.
Absolutely. Yeah, it was so great. SF stood for season finish, and they went on to win the Super Bowl. Then next, we got to talk about, we're going to go to the 2018 season. We're going to leave the 2021 season for a second, talk about that NFC Championship game, the controversial championship game. First thing that I want to say about that game is Zuerlein's kick would have been good from like 100 yards. Okay. I mean, how much leg did he get on that? I mean, how many kickers are going to hit a 48-yarder with under 20 seconds to go to tie it, and then the game-winning kick in overtime? That game had a lot, and we'll talk about the penalty in just a second. But just to come back in that game on the road, we still didn't know if this group, led by Sean McVay and Jared Goff, could even get to the Super Bowl, and they find a way to get a big road dub against that Saints team in a raucous crowd and a raucous environment.
You mentioned the 3 most important things. Number 1, Zuerlein hit a couple of bombs under extreme pressure, no doubt about it. You mentioned the fact that they, it kind of put them into the Super Bowl for the first time, a big deal. But I like that you mentioned Jared Goff. Jared Goff led them in the second half. They were behind big going into halftime, and they were a different team, and they came out, and they were chucking it around, and Jared Goff looked great. And that was the moment where, like, okay, this guy is more than just a guy that's out there doing what Sean McVay's telling him to do. He can make plays. He can make throws. I'll remember the one down the left side to Tyler Higbee that he dropped right in the bucket. It was just a beautiful, beautiful throw that kind of made you think, okay, now, did they catch a break? Yeah, that Nickel Roby-Coleman might have been there a little bit early. I mean, he might have been there slightly ahead of the ball, but, football's filled with bad calls all the time, and the Rams got one to go their way.
Yeah, no, I want to talk about that for sure. But yeah, just touching on Goff, you have to give him his flowers on this one. Leading that Rams team on an 85-yard drive to tie the game at 20. And you mentioned the play to Higbee. He was escaping pressure. He was avoiding sacks. And you end up, that was just a great play there. And then also, too, 57-yard kick by Zuerlein. But we have to talk, of course, about the penalty. Okay, yes, it was an obvious pass interference. Like you said, he did get there early. Roby-Coleman, he even had that reaction right after, like, okay, they're about to throw this flag. He's like, wait a minute, they're not going to throw that flag, right? It doesn't get called. But, hey, who got the ball first in overtime, right? What did they do with the ball in overtime? You didn't take advantage of that. Fowler, he ends up causing that interception there. And then what happened with the Goff missed face mask? They missed a Goff face mask there. They would have given the Rams 1st and goal. They would have taken the lead instead of tying it. And also, too, look, they still had a 23-20 lead even after they didn't get that call. Was it one of the worst calls of all time? Sure, but the refs didn't blow that lead. The refs didn't not get the calls for the Rams as well. So, hey, that was a face mask on Goff. So you're at home. You got to find a way to win that game if you're the Saints. You can't blame it on the refs in that situation, in my opinion.
No, it was like you mentioned, it was one of the worst calls at the worst time that you're ever going to see. And if I were a Saint fan, I would never let it go. I understand where they're coming from, but your guy Drew Brees threw a bad pick. Your guy, Drew Brees, threw an incompletion at a terrible point in that game that stopped the clock, that allowed the Rams to save a timeout, that allowed the Rams to set some things up, that allowed the Rams to kick that field goal to tie the game, to send it into overtime in the first place. The Saints contributed to their own demise. It was a terrible, terrible call. Oh, well, it went the Rams' way. But to your point, D-Mac, the Saints had ample opportunities to win that game despite that fact, and they just couldn't get it done. The Rams were given a crack in the door this much, and they kicked it down, and they went through, and they went to the Super Bowl.
Exactly. How about Ndamukong Suh stepping up? You had Fowler stepping up. A lot of people were saying they were busts that season. Suh has those 1.5 sacks in that game. But, yeah, the 57-yard kick by Zerline. Yes. Honestly, it was a bad snap and really not a great hold. Still was able to hit a booming kick. But, yeah, come on now. Let's say the Rams, they're fine. Pass interference, you can call it you want. Rams won that game on the road. And, unfortunately, the Super Bowl, every single Saints fan was a Patriots fan, just to put it like that. But next one we got to talk about, to me, I think this one kind of almost gets lost and isn't talked about quite enough, is that NFC division round game, Rams 30, Bucs 27. That was a wild one, Travis.
It was a wild one because it was about to be one of the, leading chapters in the history of Tom Brady. Right, you were what is it? A love of the game route away from being one of the victims in the Tom Brady story, of being Matt Ryan, of the 28-3, of all these things. The Rams were kicking their butts all day long. They were in complete control of that game. They were you're thinking, Tom Brady's going to go out like this? Tom Brady's going to go out getting trashed in the divisional round? And then all of a sudden, Cam Akers puts it on the ground, that they're getting ready to go in. He fumbles. They don't get that touchdown. And all of a sudden, it comes back the other way. And then Brady scores. And then they score again. And then Mike Evans beats Jalen Ramsey. And all of a sudden, all the things you need for one of those wild comebacks is happening. And I'll never forget it, D-Mac. I'm yelling at the TV. Do not throw the ball. Take a knee. Go to overtime. Regroup. Collect your feet. Just restart. Do not let this thing continue to go, because nothing was going their way. And they hit the long one, and they get, obviously Cooper Kupp does the love of the game route that they call it cover zero at the worst possible time. They hit it over the top. Matt Gay comes out and hits a pretty nice long field goal to win that game. What was 1 inch away from being one of the worst losses in the history of the organization became a great win.
That's a great point. I mean, it was razor thin. It could have been a meltdown. The Cam Akers fumble before the half, some of the turnovers. And, Tom Brady, he was going to throw punches until the very end, and he was landing some of those punches at the end, and still the Rams were able to prevail. And that, to me, was the first game when I think even the most optimistic Rams fans, they're saying, okay, now we've won on the road. We beat the defending Super Bowl champions. Matthew Stafford, he's translating his regular season magic into the postseason. I think that drive with Cooper Kupp, he ends up with 9 catches for 183 yards, but he hit him on that 20 and 40-yard reception there, and he leads them down 10 points in the fourth quarter. I think you talk about that drive with Matthew Stafford, it was fantastic, and just all the contributions. Kendall Blanton, that game, definitely probably won't get talked about. Nick Scott, that interception, had the 2 pass breakups. How about Joe Noteboom? The much maligned Joe Noteboom stepping up with Andrew Whitworth dealing with that ankle injury. Yeah, that's the game that really, I was like, okay, this team, you win this game, you're playing for the NFC Championship game at home. That's when I really started to believe. But then next, we got to talk about Monday Night Football. Okay, Monday Night Football, the barn burner. Actually, let's talk about that one after the break. We go Monday Night Football after the break, the best Monday Night Football game ever, and the one most disappointing game since the Rams have returned. And welcome back to Locked On Rams. Thank you for making Locked On Rams your first listen every single day. And a special shout out to our everyday listeners for making Locked On Rams their first listen every single weekday. You can join the Everyday Listeners Club too. Hit that subscribe button. Also, find us over on YouTube. Hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell, and also let us know, what is your favorite game since the Rams have returned to Los Angeles? Now, Travis, here in our final segment, we have to start with the best Monday Night Football game in the history of the sport. One of the best football games that I've ever seen. If this is a playoff game, if this is in the Super Bowl, to me, this is the Texas USC of the NFL. The only thing that's holding it back is the fact that it was a regular season game, but that doesn't diminish its significance. This game, 54-51. Travis, there were 14 combined touchdowns, 105 points scored. Okay. Yeah. 4 fourth quarter leads. I mean, it was just insane. I mean, you had over 1,000 yards combined. I mean, just what is your looking back now? I mean, how do you even describe the madness of that night?
Well, okay, so there's a little more context too, right? This game was originally supposed to be played in Mexico City. This was a game that was going to be played at Stadium Azteca in Mexico City. I believe it was a Shakira concert was the week before, and the field got torn to shreds, and it was just not up to par. They couldn't play an NFL game there because the turf had been so damaged, so they decided to relocate it back to the Coliseum. It was also the week, and this is not uncommon, unfortunately, here in LA, where there were the terrible, terrible wildfires here in town. So there was smoke in the air and all these sorts of things were going on. I believe it was also the week of the shooting up near the Rams facility up in Thousand Oaks. So there was all of this extra stuff in the air. And it was a really weird game because I don't think a lot of people thought that it was going to be here, et cetera, et cetera. And then it just became this wild football game. And you kept thinking, all right, the Rams can't keep trading punches with Pat Mahomes. It's just, there's just no way that if this comes down to whoever gets it last, that Mahomes isn't going to win the game. Mahomes did have it last. He threw another interception. I'm going by memory here. I want to say he had 3 interceptions in that game. It was just, and I believe Samson Ebukam had 2 defensive touchdowns. It was just so bizarre. I've never seen anything like it. They were wearing those banana-colored yellow uniforms. Everything about it was weird and awesome. And it's still the only game in NFL history where the losing team had more than 50 points.
Yeah, that to me what's so wild about it. Imagine scoring 51 points and losing. How about you imagine scoring 54 points and barely winning? Because that's what happened for the Rams. But yeah, you mentioned those 3 turnovers. Of course, you had the Marcus Peters interception. How about the LaMarcus Joyner interception that sealed the game? You mentioned Ebukam. He not only had those 2 touchdowns, the 2 defensive touchdowns, the scoop and score there with 2 minutes to go in the first half. That was a strip sack caused by Aaron Donald. Later, he had the interception. It was a defensive lineman's dream in that game. And also, too, it kind of goes unmentioned. He's the guy who applied the pressure that caused that wobbler by Mahomes to get that interception by Joyner. But to me, that was peak Jared Goff. I mean, he was in his bag. The pass he made, the dime he threw to Gerald Everett there with 1:49 left in the game, the 40-yard touchdown, they never gave the lead back. It was just insane. It was peak Goff. I mean, 172 yards and 2 touchdowns in the first half, 241 yards in the second half. He has absolutely torched that Chiefs secondary on crossing routes all night. But yeah, that game, Monday Night Football, they call it a sweaty game in Madden. When you're playing with your friend, you're sweating the whole time. That was a sweaty game for sure.
I remember it starting. I remember the Rams going down scoring right away, and then the Chiefs answered right away. And it had that feeling very early, like, this is weird. Like this is not your typical NFL game where you're just, kind of grinding possessions out. It was back and forth. It was peak McVay offense where it really did feel like McVay had broke the NFL, like he had just cracked the code on how to score touchdowns at will. Turns out that's not true, that those guys on the defensive side get paid pretty well too to figure out how to stop guys. But it was the most fun I had in the Coliseum in the entire Rams run. Just a spectacular night.
Absolutely electric. But I like how we didn't save too much time for the disappointment because, hey, who wants to talk about a disappointing game? So let's talk about the most disappointing game since the Rams have been back real quickly. And, of course, is the Rams versus the Patriots, Super Bowl 53. Not a lot of points scored in that game. The only time the Rams touchdown was when the plane hit the ground in Atlanta. They just did not have anything going. And, look, I think, to me, it's the all-time great punters game in history. Allen versus Hecker, right? We're going to look back at that as the Ollie Frazier of punting games.
Yeah, it's funny. So I remember getting on the bus at the team hotel and making our way over to Mercedes-Benz Dome. And I'm thinking to myself, man, I'm going to Super Bowl. This is going to be amazing. And we go through the Rams locker. This is probably 4 or 5 hours before the game starts, and seeing the thing laid out. It was just surreal being in this environment. walking down on the field and getting to check everything out before the game, making my way up to the press box. The game's about to kick off. And then fast forward to about halfway through the fourth quarter, a game I've ever seen in my entire life, that just nothing worked, that Sean McVay had no answers for Bill Belichick. Bill Belichick did what he's done to so many other guys. He found the one weak spot and he just exploited it to his advantage. But even late in the fourth quarter, you're thinking, you know, the Rams just need one drive and they can steal this game. And then the short pass to Brandon Cooks in the end zone, he doesn't come back for the ball. It's a little underthrown. It was just a bust of a night.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that's to me my big takeaway is the fact that they, even as bad as it was, even the fact that Bill Belichick basically ran the game plan against the Eagles and Bears that year, you applied pressure up the middle, just disrupted everything for the Rams. They still had a chance to win. The non-catch by Brandon Cooks, but also they get the ball back and they run off those big runs with Burkhead and Michelle, and that really was the beginning of the end. But my big takeaways are, one, the Rams offense just kind of shuts down without a healthy Todd Gurley. Without a healthy Todd Gurley, they're not the same. And also they missed Cooper Kupp. With the full strength roster, I still believe the Rams win that game. I think the big domino effect there is if they do win, Goff is probably still a Ram. You don't have Matthew Stafford, but still a lot more happy times with this Rams team, a lot more excitement than disappointment. But that definitely was one you look back and you say 3 points. I mean, come on now. You can't even score more points than the letters in your team name. That definitely hurts. But still, I'm still loving the fact that you got Super Bowl 56 and they're going to be fine in the future, make some more runs with this organization. But that's going to do it for this episode of Locked On Rams. My name is Doug McCain. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at DMac_LA. That man is Mr. Travis Rogers, the Travis Rogers, the people's champ. You can follow him on Twitter at Travis Rogers. And until next time, whose house? It's Locked On Rams house.